All right, we're here for week 6 recap analysis, taking a look at the latest results and the standings, seeing where we are. So I have the results from week 6 up right now. Looks like, well, I know I beat Maffey 961. Got to decide which screen I want to look at. 961. So that was a battle, probably the biggest stage battle of the week, maybe. Two teams who are in the top half. 9-6-1. Frank beats Brad after barely getting his innings, 9-7. His pitching though was absolutely atrocious. 52 innings, 7.62 ERA. I have to actually see if that's the worst of all time. Bo scrapes a win over JW with a battle of the bottom two teams in the league so far to this point in the season. Alex, with a really good week, beats French 10-6. Nate convincingly beats Casey, who's playoff hopeful, 11-4-1. That was the biggest win of the week. And then Jeremiah with a really good week, second in a row. Look out. Beats Corey 8-6-2. So actually a pretty close matchup despite a pretty good week. So here's how the standings shake out on the left here. We've got Nate at the top, Frank right behind, myself and Maffey pretty closely bunched. And then there's a pretty big gap now. Casey down below that. And another big gap, Alex and Bo. Alex is clearly trending up. Bo's been kind of trending down a little bit lately. So these seem like the 6 probably in the driver's seat for a playoff spot right at the moment just because of the standings. But obviously we have a lot of season left. So then there's Brad, Jeremiah, Corey, French, and JW, pretty much all neck and neck for the final 5 spots. So let's scroll over, take a look at some of the VTL numbers. And this is not accurate. I did this. Let's say that's 512. So the VTLs really are so congested. We're so tightly bunched. Nate is up at the top again after a couple strong weeks. It's pretty easy to forget the 2 weeks that were not great. Just thinking, though, even if it's by 0.01%, we don't have a single team at 60% total VTL through 6 weeks. That's just crazy level of competition right now. There are no free, big, easy wins. For us all to be distributed between 59.9 and 43.5 is awesome. I'm loving this competition. It just really speaks to the level of competition. All of us are pretty close together, so that's really fun. I'm behind Nate, 56.9%. Almost the same gap between Nate and I as with me and Frank. And then the same gap basically between Frank and Maffey. So to think there's only 3 teams above 51.3% VTL just means that, boy, it's just wide open. Again, I'm saying the same thing, but it's kind of cool. So Maffey and Casey are right there next to each other. And then so are Alex and Jeremiah, who both struggled to open the year, but I feel like have been just shooting straight up lately. So those 4 teams are all really close VTL wise. So I know the power rankings have been kind of the same, 5 at the top for a while. Will we see a shakeup? You'll have to keep watching. Corey, Brad, French, Bo, and JW make up the bottom 5. I would say Bo and JW are kind of back in a tier at the bottom by themselves. Corey and Brad are really, really close to each other, and certainly none of them are too far from sniffing the playoffs. If you want to look specifically at batting, Jeremiah just continues to be historically good for a team that has not improved their team through trades. In fact, he's gotten worse through trades. This offensive level is unprecedented. Nate is extremely good at offense as well, Frank as well. And then we have a few duds at the bottom here, Bo, Corey, Alex, and then shockingly JW, and then Maffey as well. Pitching wise, I'm at the top with a narrow lead over Alex or Maffey. Nate also very good, Corey also very good. Then we start getting into kind of the average teams, Bo and Casey, Frank, and we have a couple duds at the bottom, French and Jeremiah. We've updated the luck figures to be current. So Bo and Frank just continue to have great luck. Jeremiah's luck has gone a little bit back closer to normal, but he still leads the league, leads like in bad luck. He's been the most unlucky by a huge margin, but it's getting a little bit more normalized. Really, there aren't a lot of interesting notes about the luck because it's leveling out as you would expect over this course of a sample size like this. So we're going to look at this week's last week's numbers. We had a couple exceptional batting performances. Nate and Jeremiah both registering top 5% all-time numbers. Nate with a top 20% all-time week. This is in terms of total VTL. Frank with a really weird combination of elite batting, top 8% all-time, and then awful pitching, bottom 1.5% of all time. Maffey had a dreadful week offensively, but a masterful week pitching. He lost because of 36% total VTL just wasn't enough. Plus, I had a pretty good week. I was the fourth highest week. Yeah, I don't find the individual statistical ones quite as interesting as the team ones, the total VTLs here, so I don't really want to harp too much on the rest of this. Let's look at the latest tiers. So tier 1 is what I'm calling heading for a bye again, because he was already in this tier earlier in the season. I dropped him out of the top tier because Frank was charging and Nate had fallen off a couple weeks in a row. Nate's all by himself up here this week. He seems to be the favorite. I don't really feel like I am up there. Frank's not up there. Right now, it's Nate looking like the potential champ. Tier B is playoff bound. It feels likely to me that Nate, Justin, and Frank are going to be in the playoffs. Anything could happen, but unless one of them sells, it feels like those three pretty good bets. This is the tier where it gets kind of interesting to me. I'm calling this one Tier C, feels playoff worthy. Someone here is probably getting Ohtani. So we have 3 teams that I'm calling playoff teams above Nate, Justin, Frank. There are 4 teams here, meaning this is 4th through 7th. Alex and Jeremiah have both been looking way better lately. Maffey and Casey have both looked good, but not great through 6 weeks. And lately we've seen maybe some problems. Just limited ceiling is really the problem. I mean, Maffey has displayed crazy ceiling, but then really low lows. Casey has been consistently middle of the pack without really ever popping off for a big week, VTL wise. So I'm not as sold on either of them being candidates to win it all. Whereas Alex and Jeremiah, the total VTLs they have amassed between pitching plus hitting the last 2 weeks. In Alex's case, it's more like 3 of the last 4 have been really good. In Jeremiah's case, the last 2 have been really good. Good enough to the level where they would be a scary opponent for anyone in the playoffs. Maffey and Casey are not feeling as dangerous to me right now, though they certainly deserve to be all mixed up in one tier. I don't want to say that Alex and Jeremiah have really passed Maffey and Casey, but 1 or 2 more weeks where the trajectories are kind of mismatching here, and it would be a new tier probably just to themselves. Tier D, not that far behind Tier C, but appear to have a limited ceiling. Corey, French, and Brad each are good on one side of the ball and bad on the other. It's kind of hard to see a scenario where they could go on a 3-week run and beat 3 teams in the playoffs. The floor isn't very high, but that's not really the problem. The problem is the ceiling just doesn't seem to be there. Their good sides of the ball are like mid-50s VTLs, not 60, not 65. And if you're going to have a deficiency, which all 3 of these teams do, you really need something more stable to hold that. And then Tier E, selling seems reasonable, but also damaging Ohtani-wise. So obviously Ohtani is not the be-all, end-all where he's going to literally make you a great team just by having him next season. However, I could see these 2 teams starting to think about selling, but when you sell first, you may get the best return, but you also may be the worst team in the league, which means you're now picking 6th. So I don't know. There's a little bit of logic to waiting to sell, staying as high in the standings as you can. But, if you're first to market, you may actually end up being richly rewarded because there's going to be a lot of competition for your assets. Whereas if you wait till the trade deadline, everyone may have spent, all their ammunition to get better, and there may be nothing really left for you. So it's kind of an interesting debate. We're only through 6 weeks of the season, but it does feel like these two teams are going to have a hard time buying their way into contention, and buying when there doesn't appear to be a clear path forward would be really nerve-wracking for me. So those are our tiers. There's one other piece I would like to show you that I never really have gone over as part of the video, but it's one of the things I like to use when I'm considering power rankings. So these numbers are the combined VTL, which is going to be your hitting plus your pitching. And I know that that's probably confusing. It's literally your pitching VTL for that specific week plus your hitting VTL for that specific week, one number. If you are 60% hitting, 60% pitching, that's an exceptional week. That's 120 total VTL, right? So week 1, I was 132% VTL because I crushed it week 1. I was really good, not the best. Nate was 135, Matthew 139. You know that if you're Brad and you have a 68% combined VTL, that's the equivalent of having like 34% and 34%. Very poor week. So I like this because it captures, it ignores the deep red that you may see on one side. If you have exceptional talent on one end and really bad talent on the other, it's going to look normal instead of kind of putting it at that super green and super red. Anyways, I think it's a nice measure. So this is part of why I feel like Nate is a tier above. So we've seen Nate have a couple down weeks right here, 97 and 88. Not bad weeks, but not good weeks, right? But the ceiling, 135, second best that week. 130, second best that week. 142, best of the whole season for any team. 126, best of the week. So it's like 4 weeks he's been best or second best. The ceiling is enormous, and that's what championship teams seem to have. You hope you can avoid one of these down weeks in the middle of a playoff run, right? But like the ceiling here, if you look at his total percentage for 6 weeks, 719%. Again, this is all gibberish basically at this point, but this is just a way to compare, right? 719 is like 40 more than me at second. And I at second am like 60 more than third, 70 more than third. So Nate appears to be kind of in a tier in his own. Sorry, I missed Frank. I'm only like 30 ahead of Frank. We're the top 3. So if you look at my profile, I've had 1 week at 91, 1 week where I've gone really high at 132, and then the 4 weeks in a row, I've been 114, 111, 121, 111. That's like consistently between 55 to 60% VTL if you were to like add and divide by 2. So I'm more of like a high floor team, limited ceiling. Nate appears to be maybe a little lower floor, but a much higher ceiling. I really like this to analyze and see who's doing well and who's maybe trending up. And when you look at the last 2 weeks from Jeremiah, we've seen a lot of inconsistency, 79, 90, 84, these 3 weeks in the middle here. Those are not good. And those are pretty much all propped up by offense. But when you look at the last 2 weeks, 110 and 119, those will play. Obviously, it's only the 5th best of this week. It was the 3rd best of this week. If you're hanging around the 55 to 60% VTL, again, keep in mind 55 plus 55 equals 110. We're seeing 110 right here. We're seeing 119 right here. That's basically like 60 and 60. That's a lot of production. I'm not as much concerned if it's like, is it offense, is it pitching? If you are putting up 120% total VTL, your team is producing at a level that is better than the rest of the league in general terms. And I like what I'm seeing there. And then for Alex, again, lower floor, we've seen even all the way down to 67%, which that's just a dreadful week. That's like 33% on both sides of the ball, basically. So we've seen a floor that gets pretty low, another 73 over here. But the ceiling, 123, 131, and 122. When you consider that 3 of the last 4 weeks, Alex has been 122 or better, that's scary. Like that's a team with a lot of talent. So I am choosing to believe this is why the power rankings have reflected them being up above teams like Casey, above teams like Maffey, who have been pretty average lately. For Casey, 99, 97, 76, below 500 3 weeks in a row. Maffey had a couple good weeks, 2 of the last 3, which is why he's above Casey, but you still see the 69, 86, and 89. There is the 139 too, which I shouldn't forget, but I think Jeremiah and Alex are really trending in the right direction, and I think these numbers help kind of support that. So yeah, anyways, just one other wrinkle of something I haven't shown you guys before. I like to kind of look at all these numbers and use it, try to make some logical choices when I'm doing these power rankings. It's not just about who's my best buddy or something. So anyways, I think that's pretty much all I got. Yeah, so hopefully this new recording software I'm using is working out fine, but I guess I will see when I review it. But yeah, see you next week. I do want to have more people on this video next week, maybe have it like be part of a bigger discussion, because it's the end of the first third of the season, and that is one of the best times to look back and kind of compare historically across years. VTL wise, we can see what teams kind of look like last year at this time, 2 years ago. I think that sounds fun. So hopefully we'll have a few other people on and we can just chat about fantasy baseball for a little bit. But until then, see ya.